And we're going live at 10, I assume 9, 8. Okay, a little bit of water. I'm just wait. Hey everybody, how are you? And welcome to Lawyer Horror Stories at Indy FurCon Online 2020. I am the Boozy Badger, your erstwhile host of this panel in the past, and we'll go over the rules here in a moment. But first, I want to go over who are these wonderful, beautiful, handsome, amazing faces in the room with me today. Starting to on our work down, I will say I think that is my right, your left. Buddy?
Hello, Buddy Goodboy.
What area of law do you practice in, Buddy?
Currently working in-house counsel for a medical practice. Previously, had experience in bankruptcy and government contracting. And I was working at a mediation center, so I've done a couple of dozen divorces.
And what state are you based in?
Georgia, as you can tell from my accent.
It's a horrible accent. Next up, we have the lawyer pony from the Northeast, Sage.
Hi, I'm Sage. I'm a prosecutor in New York. I'm an appellate lawyer, and my office's ethics expert.
Down there in the bottom left-hand corner on my screen is the sexiest rat you'll ever meet coming to us. Coming to us live at Scuffin' Dings.
Hello, I am Scuffin' Dings. I am a prosecutor in Kansas. I have done trial work. I currently do charging work, but I've been doing it for about 10 years.
And directly below our Georgia good boy is the horniest lad on earth.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tiago Montero Leon. I'm licensed in the state of Maryland. I currently work for a medium-sized firm in rural Western Maryland. It's one of those firms where they kind of do a little bit of everything to stay alive. Right now, I've got everything from divorce, custody, and adoption to serious traffic defense, so DUIs and things like that. I handle a little bit of workers' compensation, personal injury, and general civil. Before that, I was briefly an assistant state's attorney. If you've ever watched Law & Order, we're called district attorneys. Maryland just calls them something different. And then before that, I worked for the trial court in Maryland, and I was the legal fellow for the Juvenile Delinquency and Animal Cruelty Division of a major metropolitan Washington, D.C. area prosecutor's office.
Thank you. And I am Boozy Badger. I'm a Pennsylvania general practice trial and litigation attorney licensed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, practice in all courts, the federal courts of Pennsylvania, as well as the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, a few things to understand before we get the panel going. First of all, you may have seen this done by other people at other cons. The way we do it here is we do it as a Q&A. We want you to be able to ask us questions about the practice of law, and we will ramble in a response that sounds like an answer but may or may not be. If you traumatize us, you will know. We will let you know you have traumatized us with your question. But to be very clear, nothing you are about to hear today is legal advice. While we are all licensed attorneys, we are not your attorneys. We will not address or answer specific legal questions on a situation. No attorney-client privilege will attach, as should be obvious by the fact you are asking these questions in a public setting. Please do not think you're going to be clever and say, hypothetically, if. We know it's not hypothetical. Don't ask questions for a friend. We know it's you because you have no friends. All that said, if you want to join in on the question and answer session today, please go over to the Indy FurCon Live Telegram chat, which we are monitoring. We will open the open the floor to questions right now, looking at the Indy FurCon chat. Does anyone have a question that we should answer? And while we're waiting on that, we have one right off the bat. What is the best way to teach someone who's not a lawyer the difference between you are wrong versus you are wrong?
No, I keep losing those cases, so I'm going to keep quiet for this one.
You are wrong versus you. Specifically, you are wrong. Tiago, you're in the same field I am. What do you have?
God, when has that been a situation where there's actually been a difference? There's a clear difference between misunderstanding the law and just being a jackass, and I've had a little bit of both. And nothing really comes to mind as a specific example for some reason.
I've had plenty of cases where I'm like, yeah, technically that's right, but the way you did it is not. They're like, technically I can cut down the trees that are overhanging the property line. I'm like, technically you're right, but you shouldn't have done it with dynamite. I've had those before. Buddy, you advise doctors.
Yeah.
How often do you get to tell a doctor they're wrong?
Oh, so many times.
How good does it feel?
It feels very good, actually. I like being on my side of the desk for once.
It's like an orgasm.
Doesn't even compare. But my bankruptcy clients, those are the ones that I got to tell that to the most often. I did have a guy that I was totally in agreement with every single thing that he said. Student loans, especially federal student loans, should be dischargeable in bankruptcy. But, me at my little rinky-dink bankruptcy firm at the time, I'm not going to be able to do anything about that because, I don't have that kind of sway. So he's calling up, yelling at me, just letting me have it because I won't take his case in particular to the Supreme Court, even though it's already a matter of settled law.
Well, it is and it isn't. And so I do a lot of bankruptcy litigation right now. And I get questions about student loans on a pretty regular basis. And the way I phrase it is technically you can get them discharged, but not unless you're missing all of your arms and legs and you can't speak or hear or see. And even then they may find out that you can get a job pounding dust out of carpets. So you shouldn't be entitled to discharge. There's a bunch of different tests. The main leading one, the majority test is, I don't know how many of you do, but it's called the Bruner test. And it's an amazingly difficult test bankruptcy wise. I saw a question go through earlier, and it is, what is the most absurd case you have taken to court?
I have one.
Go.
I am representing someone who is suing their neighbor over barking dogs. It's currently scheduled for a jury trial.
That seems like a regular one. That's not absurd.
Yeah, I'm not a litigator. I've worked on one of those.
Yeah, the dog barking. I've sent out the nasty letter, which is, the dogs fucking bark, man. Get over it.
I mean, if you're in criminal, there's always going to be the cases that are what we call the shaggy defense. It wasn't me. They caught you on video. It wasn't me. They have your DNA. It wasn't me. Your best friend who's known you since 10 says it was you. It wasn't me. So, you get these ridiculous cases. If any of you watched our panel at Megaplex, I talked about a Periscope case. So, for those of you who don't remember, Periscope predated Facebook Live, but it was integrated to Facebook. This guy, there was a series of burglaries, someone breaking into houses this one week, and they didn't really have any suspects. And they had collected blood, but we didn't have DNA back. They had collected some fingerprints, but the fingerprints weren't an APHIS, so we didn't have fingerprints yet. And they catch a guy about a week later coming out of a house. And he's got his phone on him. And they see that his phone is on Facebook. So they get a search warrant to search his phone. And they find out that he had periscoped himself burgling these houses. So he was inside these people's houses. At one point, he's like, I'm in this bitch's house. Look what I got. And he holds up her watch. And he had pawned this watch. And this victim had said, they stole my watch from me. His defense wasn't me. Wasn't me. On video, they get the DNA back. It's his blood. It's like a 1 in 8 octillion chance that it could be somebody else. His fingerprints are at some of them. He is personally ID'd by 2 of the witnesses. Wasn't me. So, the most ridiculous cases to go to trial are always the ones where your clients just will insist that they did nothing.
I have a case like that. It's a domestic violence case. Boyfriend goes to girlfriend's house and is all pissed off at her for something really stupid. So he burns all of her papers, ruins all of her clothes, and then throws her ruined clothes out the back onto this back porch. Then he videotapes himself going through the apartment on his cell phone saying, hey, just so you know, I've destroyed everything that you own. I have ripped up your tires. I have, anything that you have, I'm going to absolutely destroy, and then texts it to her. It goes to trial, and the defense at trial is, well, you don't know that That wasn't his stuff he destroyed.
I've seen the opposite coming from the state.
I just when Scuffle's like your best friend from 10 years old said it was you, and it wasn't me. I'm like, no, that's not accurate. Your best friend from the age of 10 has identified you. Never heard of the motherfucker in my life. No clue. Don't know who he is. Never seen him before.
I never knew the guy. I actually had, I wasn't in this case. This was back from when I was judicial law clerk, but I actually saw a prosecutor argue to a judge with a straight face that because somebody was harassing their ex-girlfriend on Twitter, and because during that time window that the harassment on Twitter was going on, somebody threw a brick through the ex-girlfriend's window. Clearly, even though nobody saw who threw the brick through the window, it was this guy harassing her on Twitter who clearly was the boyfriend. The judge just looked at her and didn't even blink before saying, not guilty, all charges.
So here's the thing you have to understand about being a trial prosecutor, and it's one of those things that a lot of even new public defenders don't understand, is prosecution works in different levels of like when we get engagement. So what happens is you're arrested, your case is sent, the police send your case to the prosecutor. A charging attorney decides whether or not they're going to charge it based on some initial reports and an affidavit of the police swearing that these are the facts, just general, not a lot of evidence when you charge it. And then it's assigned to a trial prosecutor after that. The charging attorney doesn't touch it. The trial prosecutor, depending on the district attorney, and most district attorneys are like this, will not let them dismiss a case no matter what. Like, it is so hard to get your boss to let you to dismiss a case. But in the meantime, like, you could have very bad facts come up, and the defense attorney is like, this case is a loser, you should just dismiss it. And in your head you're like, this case is a loser, I should just dismiss it. And your boss is like, no, here's the angle you should take. I'm like, oh, thanks. Thank you for your sage fucking wisdom. I really appreciated it.
Somebody in the chat said, why would you bother taking a case to trial? I'm assuming that's what you saw, Scuff, if you know it's a home run. And the other side of what Scuffle says, as when you're doing criminal defense work, why would you take a case to trial instead of plea it out? A, as a defense attorney, you don't get to make that call. That is the client's call. Some clients are very... B, here's the simple rule of thumb. Hey, Scuff, for a conviction, how many jurors do you need?
Why, I need 12, Boozy.
For a mistrial, how many jurors do I need?
Why, Boozy, you need 1.
That's why you take it. And sometimes you do that because even though you know your guy's going to get convicted on something down the road, you know that if you can hang the jury, you can at least get a better plea sometimes. I've done that before. I've taken a case to trial with the full intention of hanging the jury so that afterwards I can go back to the prosecutor and say, I hung him again. I hung him once. I can hang him again. I can hang him to the end of fucking time. Why don't we talk about a reasonable plea?
Generally in the state of... Sorry, I keep cutting people off.
How many hung juries where your judges usually let you get before they'll give you a...
Technically, there's no limit in PA as long as the prosecution continues refiling within a reasonable time. General rule of thumb, 2.
Okay.
You get 2 trials, and after that, the judge is more or less going to say you haven't proven your case in 2 cases.
They'll grant judgment of acquittals in Kansas. They'll say that there's no reasonable expectation that a future jury will find them.
You can bring the motion for that here. It's not guaranteed, but generally, if you can hang a jury twice, it's pretty likely that the judge will grant. So.
I've done similar in bench trials. In Maryland, usually you don't take a incarcerable traffic offense to a jury unless there's a specific reason. For example, you have the right to a trial by jury, and you know if you plea in front of a judge, it's going to screw your client. I had one where the prosecutor just decided to give we're going to fuck around with you plea offer, and I took it to trial and undercut what they were going to recommend at sentencing anyways. So that's another reason you might take a loser to trial, is knowing that the prosecutor wants a stricter penalty than you can get out of the judge in a bench trial. You might do it just so that the judge sentences your guy in the way you expect.
So that's interesting, because in New York, the defendant has an absolute right to just plead guilty. So if you're getting some bad sentence, some bad recommendation from the prosecutor, and you go up to the judge and say, Judge, my guy doesn't want to go to trial. Give him 5 years. Judge go, okay. And then we, as the prosecutor, are like, well, fuck.
We had our first traumatizing question come up in the chat. This is from Silence. What is the most unprepared your client has shown up for court?
I got one.
That is a like, look at everybody's face. Everybody's just, yeah.
Except for the prosecutors who don't have a
stand
clients.
behind Daddy on camera in your underwear.
You say hi and bye.
Let me put my shoulder up to block the underwear child that rampages through my house.
I've had so this was actually during COVID. Our courts are open on a limited basis. I have had a client show up a minute before the judge took the bench to call their criminal matter. Text message me from outside the courthouse going, "I forgot my mask." And this was after getting a really sweet plea deal for that client. I almost strangled her.
Marijuana offense, and the client showed up wearing a T-shirt that read 420 blazing it.
That's a good one. I just had a hearing. I do mental hygiene court, so I get to deal with people who have been found insane. I had a hearing where we called a doctor, a psychiatrist, but still a medical doctor. This was 2 weeks ago. She shows up to the courthouse, and by the way, this is true in New York. You have to have a mask to go into the courthouse. She didn't have a mask, our doctor. To which yes, the doctor didn't have a mask. To which my co-counsel quite reasonably said, "Why don't you have a mask?" To which she said, "No, it's fine. I can't catch it." To which my co-counsel's like,
witness.
Totally leaving aside the insanity of that statement, doctor, you need something to go into the stupid room, and I need you to go into the room before I can call you as a witness. So the doctor goes through her bag and is like, "Oh, wait, I have this child's mask." And puts on a child's mask.
Can you understand why I tend to do these from the basement?
Why did she have a child's mask but not an adult mask?
I don't know, buddy, and I didn't want to ask because...
Fair enough.
I don't
Did she have children at least?
I don't believe so. No, I think she deals with like children as a psychiatrist, and therefore had a mask from... I don't know what she was doing.
Well, why would she have a mask, though? She can't catch it.
Yeah, but the kids can.
Yeah, probably from her, because, I don't know, I guess we called Typhoid Mary as our witness. So she's sitting there in a stand, on the stand, completely unable to get the microphone to work, which is fun, all the time with this tiny little mask, just keep pulling it up so her hand is in front of her face like this, so we can't hear her even more, on top of her mask kept falling down.
Buddy, you had your hand up.
Oh, I was
because apparently we're in school now. That's how it works. Buddy, Mr. Good Boy, please answer the question.
Oh, yeah, okay. This was not so much unprepared as unprepared and extremely counterproductive. Again, bankruptcy client was asked if he had any assets that had been undeclared on any of his schedules. So you're not allowed to get a discharge in your bankruptcy if you have enough property that you could sell it and pay off your debts. Yep. So you're required to list everything you have. He did not, as I found out at that exact moment, because he had $20,000 of inflatable party equipment in his garage that he was planning on using to start a business, completely breaking the non-competition agreement he had with his previous company, who he had in fact stolen all those things from.
Well, why didn't you just flip him into a Chapter 13?
Well, because he didn't qualify for anything really. I mean,
everybody qualifies for a 13.
Yeah, well,
just a question of can they make their payments? Yeah.
No, No, he wasn't going to make payments.
And you know what? You only care about, realistically, you only care about, are they going to make their payments through the confirmation of the plan? Because that's when you get paid.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was not at one of my good law firms that I was working at, so the Chapter 13 guys were just out to screw me constantly. So
I
honestly
do just
don't
want to
remember
make
how
sure.
that ended.
I do just want to make sure I understood you correctly, though. The man stole $20,000 worth of bouncy houses.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, those are strangely a really good investment.
Yeah,
Well,
Yes,
that's
we've
a
all
conversation-
seen the
that's a-
10th Kingdom Scuffs.
That's a conversation for another day. So someone asked something
No,
about
that's a conversation for right now. That's you don't get to lead in with. You know what I discovered? Strangely bouncy houses, wonderful investment opportunity.
They hold
later.
Do we have any inflation furs in the crowd? Because now's the time to announce it, because people are going to want to invest in you after this.
they hold their value very well, and if you are renting them for like your kids' events, it's better to actually just buy them and then sell them like 5 years later than continue to rent them year after year.
I have one follow-up question. How much does a bouncy house actually cost?
I don't know. My sister does
Surprisingly
all
a
this
lot.
stuff. My sister does all of this stuff. I don't have kids. If you
Wait, your sister
you might
owns bouncy houses?
My sister owns 2 bouncy houses.
You're holding out on us.
I have invited you to come hang out with me.
Roll
I'm
your
not holding-
bouncy house, Con. Come on.
I'm with Boozy on this
Yeah.
one.
This is the first I'm hearing about it.
I'll
So.
just be drunk in a corner. You guys know that.
Look, I have invited you over. We can have Bouncy House Lawyer Con.
Yeah, it didn't say the bouncy houses.
Yeah, like I would have been on a plane a month ago if you mentioned the bouncy houses. I flew across the country for a ball pit, man. I will fly to Kansas for a bouncy house.
Well, there we
You
go.
know, rat in a dress. I'll take that too.
Okay, we'll have
That's
Rat and-
automatic. That just comes.
Yeah,
whenever
that just comes
Scuffs is
with the
around.
that comes with the party.
That's complimentary with the bouncy house rental. There are a lot of confused 5-year-olds in their area.
Someone asked about our like most unexpected trial win, and I wanted to talk about one thing with jury trials, and that leads into it perfectly, which is Boozy had said like why do you try a trial because he only needs one juror. I had a jury trial once. It was a DUI. There is nothing spectacular about this DUI. Cop gets behind this guy. He's going about 15 miles over the speed limit. He doesn't pull over. He goes down the road, pulls into his mother's yard, jumps out of the driver's seat, runs around the house, comes back around, drunk as a skunk, and says, "Oh, did you catch the driver? He ran away over there." Whole thing's on video, by the way. Whole thing is on video. And so he admits he's a drunk. His defense is, I wasn't driving. His defense is, I was buying this car. I met this guy at a bar. He was selling his truck. He gave me a test drive. He was driving down the road and he saw you and he didn't want to stop. Now, why he pulls into the driver's mother's house, the truck, by the way, is registered to his mother. So it's at the time they pull it over. The jury we get done with this case at like 3 p.m. The jury deliberates until 6 o'clock at night, decides that they need more time. They come back the next day. They deliberate all day, from 9 a.m. until 6 o'clock at night when they finally find him guilty. So jurors, by the way, can talk to us about the cases afterwards, so sometimes we get to know. So the foreman calls me on the phone the day after the verdict, and he's like, "Oh, I wanted to talk to you about this case." And I'm like, "I want to know how you deliberated for 12 hours." He's like, "Well, when we went back to that jury room, we voted, and it was 6-6, guilty, not guilty." And at that point, like, my brain's about to explode. And he goes, "The reason we decided to find this guy guilty is he said he was leaving from a bar called the Firelight. Well, the bar used to be called the Firelight. Now it's called, like, the Watering Hole. And we realized that this guy was an old drunk who'd been going to that bar forever. And that's why we found him guilty." And I'm like, not because he was driving his mother's car, stopped at his mother's house, and was on video driving, because he had the wrong name of the bar. That's why they found him guilty.
Wait a second. Was the name change of the bar ever introduced into evidence in the trial?
No.
So that's juror misconduct, is what you're telling me. You got your conviction because the jurors considered evidence that was not presented at trial based on their personal knowledge in reaching the plea.
Well, you'll
Can I-
like
can I
this
just
because
use that
I
to make a
told the
point?
defense attorney this story. By the way,
Okay.
I did not hold out. I called the defense attorney. And I'm like, Jim, I have to tell you the conversation I just had with the jury foreman. And he was he just didn't talk for about 3 minutes. And he's like, that's fucked up.
12 Angry Men is one of the 2 most accurate lawyer movies ever. The other one is My Cousin Vinny.
And if you watch them back to back, then you get the whole process in a row.
It's amazing.
Oh, now I have one on the stupid DUIs, which wasn't as stupid. The guy was incredibly intelligent. It's the best example of how to interact with the police when you know you're going to jail that I've ever heard. It wasn't one of my cases. It was one of my father's cases when I worked in his office. It's down in Kentucky. Pouring down rain one night, a member of the local police saw a vehicle in a ditch just wrecked, just completely wrecked. Nobody's around the vehicle. There's no blood, nothing. It'd been pouring down rain for maybe 10 minutes. The officer drives like a mile up the road. He sees a White Castle that's open. He pulls into the parking lot. He goes inside. The moment he walks in, like people in the White Castle just point to one guy. And the guy's sitting there dripping wet, like soaking wet, eating a slider. He's the only soaked person there. It was very obvious this man had walked there during the rain. The officer walked up to him and said, excuse me, sir, are you driving? Gave the type of car, and the gentleman said, nope, I'm not. I'm sitting in this White Castle eating a burger. And he goes, well, have you been driving it? And the guy goes, nope, don't recall doing that. And the officer says, well, you're the only one soaking wet, and there's one wrecked like half a mile up the road. I think you were driving it. And the guy looks the officer dead in the eye, finishes off the last of the burger, and says, prove it, pig. He turns around and takes a sip of his drink. They did.
Every once in a while, you'll get DUI cases where one of the defenses is, I wasn't drunk, I'm just an asshole.
Yeah, I'm not. I wasn't drunk. I had one of those. I had a guy that was driving under the influence of drugs. The guy had bought some drugs. The police had seen him. He took off driving, sideswiped some cars, bailed out of his vehicle, ran into an alley. They found him in the alley, utilizing the narcotics in the polite term, and placed him under arrest. And they had the charge of driving while impaired. And the way you do that is you do it with a test. And if it's over a certain amount in the system, you can presume that they were driving while under the influence of it. And our defense was, well, wait a second, officer. When you found him in the alley, he was using those drugs. Yes. So they were in his bloodstream at that time. Yes. How do you know he was under the influence of them when he was driving, though?
No,
Because
there's a surprising number of cases.
Tests, unlike alcohol, when you do like a blood test for alcohol, you can actually trace the degradation of alcohol within a reasonable amount of certainty as to when it was consumed. Okay, to kind of extrapolate a level. Drug tests don't do that. Drug tests tell you how much is present, but not how long ago it was used. There's no extrapolation mechanism.
Do you have many extrapolation cases in your jurisdictions?
No, man, this is Pennsylvania. Like, if you get pulled over drunk driving in Pennsylvania, you're drunk, and you're obviously drunk. We actually had a lot of our DUI cases get tossed and recharged as unclassified lowest level recently because a Supreme Court decision came down that said the blood test was invasive and required either a warrant or consent. And therefore, while you could have the administrative penalties for refusing, you couldn't add an enhanced criminal penalty for refusing. And the thing they read before taking the blood was you can refuse it, but you'll have an enhanced criminal penalty. The Supreme Court tossed out enhanced criminal penalties, and Pennsylvania basically had a bunch of cases go, yeah, because our warning made it clear there was enhanced criminal penalty, it's coercive. So we've got to throw out all of these tests that were taken under that and recharge them as lowest level.
Wow. New York has an enhanced penalty too, but it's you lose your license automatically.
Oh yeah, no, like I'll tell people, if you refuse, they're going to administratively suspend your license.
The license suspension is independent of the conviction, so they can do that because it's the civil penalty.
Yeah.
I actually know the exact case you're talking about because the Kansas Supreme Court had found that the breath test was overly invasive and couldn't be done without a warrant. And then the Supreme Court of the United States said, no, the breath test isn't, but the blood test is.
Yeah.
So
Same case.
we
Same
were,
case.
yeah, we were like everybody was, I think kind of across the country, most of us were following it if you did prosecution or defense.
That was a payday. That was a payday. Everybody who was like getting ready to go into diversions and shit suddenly were like, I want you to contest my conviction because of it. I'm like, cha-ching, motherfucker. Cha-ching.
I have a sovereign citizen story that I can tell.
Okay.
So I will preface this by saying, and I think everyone's going to agree with me, sovereign citizens are the best people in the world in someone else's case. When they're in your case, they're fucking terrifying, man. They're just like scary. So I do appeals. I get stuff after there's already been a conviction. I got a case where it was a sovereign citizen, dead, like 100% sovereign citizen, purist, most like, here's a list of sovereign citizen things. He just gave that to the judge. The defense on appeal, when he got assigned a lawyer, was my client is incompetent to stand trial and should not have gone to trial because look at this bullshit nonsense that he believes. List of sovereign citizen beliefs. To which my response was, well, he's a sovereign citizen. He's not crazy. And I do know that. So he's not incompetent. He's an asshole. To which the defense attorney turned around and wrote a letter to the court and said, upon reading the people's brief, I can no longer in good faith present the arguments that I have presented in my brief and therefore wish to withdraw my brief and file what's called an Andrews brief, which is when your defense attorney says, nah, that's cool. Everything was perfect. We're just going to let it go. Which really put me in an interesting position because that was one point in his brief and there were three others, which while wrong, weren't like related to the sovereign citizen at all. So I convinced this attorney that he was wrong, but then had to argue why he couldn't withdraw his brief afterwards.
We had a bankruptcy case a couple years ago, and the people were very obviously soft-sits, but our judge, who retired last year, used to have in front of his courtroom a handout, and on the top of it he had written in Sharpie, "Sovereign citizens read this." And it explained why they were getting no traction in his courtroom at all and how they shouldn't even fucking try it. So they hired us on it. And of course, with soft sits, like even though they have a lawyer, they kind of assume you're just there for form. So my client's doing things like, I want to talk to the judge. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I'm telling them why it's a bad idea. And finally, we have a disagreement. And they want me to file a motion. I say, I'm not filing that motion. It's just going to piss off the judge. It's going to prejudice your case. It's going to almost automatically have you lose. I'm not filing it. And the client said, fine, I don't want you to represent me. I said, okay, fine. So I filed a motion to withdraw. And the judge set my motion and the motion that they then filed on their own for the same day. The judge called us first. The judge knew me at that point. Said, John, would you walk me there? So I walked him through everything. He goes, okay, I'm going to grant your motion to withdraw. And they said, and as for your motion, he said, like the moment he waited for the bailiff to bring up the order, sign the order, letting me out of it, handed it over, waited for the clerk to say they had it, they were entering in the docket, then turned to my former client and said, as for your motion, it is denied. The sale of the property will move forward next Thursday. And my client said, well, I need time to retain counsel. And the judge said, you had very good counsel and you wouldn't listen to them. It was amazing.
I had, when I was working as the judicial law clerk, surprisingly, I haven't had many sovereign citizens in practice, but working as a judicial law clerk, we had a criminal docket where there was a sovereign citizen in the audience. He was charged with a criminal offense. The state calls the docket in our county. The state called the case, and the guy kind of just stood up and stood there but didn't come forward. And so the state's attorney looked around and pretty much, Your Honor, no one's coming forward. So the judge looks back at him and goes, "Are you so-and-so?" And he goes, "No, I am not so-and-so. I am so-and-so's whatever the magical sovereign citizen words of, I am the representative of so-and-so.
I'm the flesh and blood representative of the corporate entity known as so-and-so.
So the judge just looks at him and goes, "So you're telling me right now that you are not this person?" And they go, "Yes." He goes, "Okay, so this person is not here, are they?" And they go, "No." And he goes, "Okay. Then so-and-so failed to appear. State issues a bench warrant to be arrested upon sight and direct deposited to the judge, which is a term in our court to bypass the district court commissioner. In Maryland, if you are arrested, you go before a district court commissioner who is a judicial officer but not a judge. They determine whether or not you can be released pending trial. He used the tool he had to have them directly brought before a judge. Issued the bench warrant, and then watched as this guy had to walk out past every sheriff that was standing there, because we're still a county where the sheriff enforces criminal laws. I don't know how long it took after he got out of the courthouse to get arrested, but he was back pretty quickly.
All right. We had a question earlier that I kind of liked because I've been watching a bunch of the BuzzFeed ghost shows. But somebody had asked, have you ever had a case involving the supernatural?
No, my guys are mostly just assholes.
They're not ghostly assholes, just normal assholes?
Normal assholes, flesh and blood.
Do we count aliens as the supernatural?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay, well...
I mean, Sage...
Oh,
sorry.
Right. I completely forgot about this guy. Guy had been struck by lightning, giving him powers, his words, beyond those of mortal men. And he was this close, not even kidding you, this close to figuring out time travel. So as soon as he does that, he's going to go back in time and not have to declare bankruptcy at all, so we shouldn't charge him.
I see no problem with that logic.
Well,
Yeah, that's what I said.
I see no problem with everything up until we shouldn't charge him.
Against my recommendations, my bosses took his case.
Man, if you turn down every crazy person, you won't have clients.
Yeah,
That's why I wasn't in charge of the business end.
I mean, I can't tell you how many. I've had clients walk in my office. I had one who's like, I need you to have my wife committed. I'm like, is she not competent? He's like, no, she's competent. She just won't put me on her bank account. And I'm like, that's not grounds for commitment, sir. Grounds for divorce.
It's showing a lack of commitment.
You know, now, of course, considering the type of person who's like, I want you to put my wife in the mental institution so I can access their money. I'm kind of like, well, your wife seems to have good judgment in not placing you on that account.
No kidding.
That seems like a rather drastic way to handle your marital discord.
Someone asked if you'd ever had a Karen as a client, and I don't have clients, thankfully. Yeah, thankfully.
No,
But,
you do. Your client is the people of the people of Kansas. So you represent
people of Carrot.
You represent all the Karens. Your client is all the Karens. The ultimate Karen, Karen Supreme, if you will.
So I used to work in a very high crime inner city, and the world made sense to me there. It made sense. Everyone was on the same page. We were all coworkers. Some of the coworkers went home at the end of the day, and some went to jail at the end of the day. But the life made sense. And then I moved to the burbs, and nothing makes sense. And the Karens do not understand why they should get in trouble for anything. I mean, they don't, and especially if it's their kids. It's like, my kid may have been selling heroin, but I don't understand why you're coming after him. He's just a victim here. He's like, you bought him a Porsche last week, and he apparently decided that he needed more money, so he started selling heroin to a bunch of 17-year-olds. And now you're mad at me because he got arrested, and then because he's a suburban asshole, he confessed to everything.
I represent the opposite of Karen. My practice is small. It's everything from your landlord-tenant matter all the way up to multi-million-dollar, multi-state real estate fraud cases. I've handled everything in my office that can come across a lawyer's desk at some point. My favorite group of clients, though, there is a 1% biker gang in the southeast Pennsylvania area. They are very violent. They are very heavily criminally involved, but they do have families and they do need wills and own businesses. And I represent a lot of them. A lot of them. And recently, they purchased a building in the small town that I live in as their clubhouse. And I expressed some concern with one of them as I was finishing up his sweet little old mother's will. And his exact words were, "Oh, don't worry about that. We don't shit where we sleep. The town will be fine. And by the way, since they closed the only bar in your town, if you ever want a beer, you got an open invitation at our clubhouse." And I'm like, sitting here like, I could go like 3 blocks up in my small town and drink with a bunch of bikers who have killed someone. And on the way back, because this was during the COVID time, so we did the signing of the will at their house, I had my spouse with me as a witness. And I said, it's nice to know I can go up the street and get a beer. And my wife goes, "No. No, you cannot go drink with the murderers."
I had
Tom Hagen. What are you gonna do when they ask you to be a wartime consigliere?
I'll tell them that I'm very good at handling zoning issues for their titty bar, but they probably shouldn't ask me how to take out the Hells Angels.
No, I don't have anything that fun, but I've had car accident cases where I particularly had one client who, by the end of it, wanted every copy of every piece of correspondence that I communicated with the insurance adjuster because she just couldn't understand why, despite the fact a police officer found her at fault, she was actually at fault for her accident. And when we finally told her there was nothing more to do, we could do for her, she wrote a very, very, very critical email of our services to the managing partner, who was the one that fired her, and demanded that we immediately send her file so she can contact a quote-unquote reputable attorney, which we had no problem doing because we know no one's going to take her fucking case.
There is a question in the chat that I hate to bring up because it kills the comedy vibe, but it's a very good question about the practice of law. They had asked it in the realm of disability cases, but because of the broad number of people on our panel, the question is, how do you tell a client that everything's been exhausted and that the system is simply broken because they are losing their case? How do you handle that? Does it get hard or does it weigh on you differently? So really, how do you tell a client the system is what the system is and the outcome here is not fair? And how does it affect you?
You owe your client the truth. So,
Yeah.
I mean, basically, what I do in those situations is, you let them have it as you see it, and then typically I stress eat afterwards.
Yeah,
I got used to it after a while. I mean, it's one of the reasons, though it is one of the reasons I don't do as much trial work. I mean, I've had multiple cases where I did murder trials. I was a prosecutor at a very high level, and the mythology is sometimes that prosecutors win every case, that you have the state behind you and you're always going to get it. Witnesses disappear. Witnesses stop being cooperative. Lots of the cases that are filed are really bad. And I have had to tell a lot of families that we're never going to get justice for your family member who was murdered. And at first it was like a dagger. I had a co-counsel on a murder case that went to trial, and we were never going to win. It was a bad case. It was a stand your ground sort of case, and we were always going to have a not guilty, but we had to try it. And so we try it. We got a not guilty. I talked to the family. I always did it in person. If we were going to dismiss or we got a not guilty, I made it a point of it was an in-person conversation, so the family could vent and get out what they needed to get out and just talk to them and listen to them. and my co-counsel went home, and he's my age. He's a man, like he's a guy my age, kind of tough, conservative dude. He told me he cried like all night, and it's hard. It's hard to confront people and tell them that the law is not going to work for you.
Yep.
But you kind of get used to it.
I have
Yeah.
a slightly different perspective because again, I do appellate law mostly. When I'm doing actual like in-person court stuff, it's mental hygiene stuff, which is like a hospital trying to keep a crazy person in a hospital, and it's not a big deal generally. But the appeals can get tough because here's the thing: we can have a case where a defendant is convicted and he's guilty. We know he's guilty. And then goes up on appeal and something got fucked up. And I have to go then tell that victim, we got to start over. Or even worse than that, we can't start over, right? We're done. This is it. We lost and there's nothing I can do about it. And that's rough. And the real thing is that all of the law can be rough. And you'll hear lawyers are one of those professions where we all kind of develop weird senses of humor because it's the only way you can cope with some of the shit you see every day. I'm swearing a lot. Is that okay?
Yeah, they know.
Okay,
what
cool.
I mean, like I said, I represent people. I represent a lot of people. And I have had to say things that range from, I'm sorry, we did everything we could, but you're going to lose your kids, to, I'm sorry, we did everything we could, but you're going to lose your house. And when I first started practicing, it would weigh heavily on me. I got lucky in that I grew up with an attorney. My father is a first-generation attorney. I grew up in his office. So when I would have those times, I could call Dad and say, Dad, how do you handle this? How do you handle that? And a lot of times what Dad said is you get used to it. And it's the truth. You do. It sounds bad to say that, but you do get used to it. You learn to compartmentalize. You leave things at the office or when you put the file down. And yet that's not to say we don't care about your case. We do. I can't tell you how many times I've laid in bed at 3 a.m. thinking about a case or a hearing or how I'm going to do something for somebody. But when the case is over, it's over. And you make sure your clients understand you did everything you could. My spouse has come to my office at 1 a.m. to bring me dinner, found me sitting on the couch in the front of the office, and I'll sit there and I'll look at them and I'll say, these people have put their faith in me, and there's nothing I can do for them. But you compartmentalize it. I have told clients before, no matter what happens today, I'm going home. You may not be. I am. And it sounds callous, but that's only followed up with, but that's what you want in your lawyer. You want somebody who cares about your case, but can still see it objectively, because when you get too emotionally tied in, you miss things. You look at things one way. You don't look at things from the other point of view or look at the small things in there. It's a rough job. It can take a mental toll. Show of hands, how many people in here have a colleague with a drug or alcohol addiction? How many people in here have a colleague who has been in therapy for years? Attorneys have one of the highest incidents of drug and alcohol addiction and abuse of any profession. And it's simply because we all are told to say this, and a lot of us do. A client hires you and you tell them, go home and sleep. Get some rest tonight because it's my problem now. But the only way you make it through this profession is by learning to compartmentalize and learning to some extent that the end of the case is the end of the case.
And let me clarify that this is regardless of if your client wins or loses. Even if your client wins, you can be dragged through a hell of a lot. I had a family case where a client worked out a settlement agreement, and the marital settlement agreement itself was written exactly as my client wanted. It functioned exactly as my client was intending it to function. And it was used against her to take her children away from her for a month against her wishes because of the tie-breaking authority provided in there. And the fact that given the status of the court, because we were in the middle of the pandemic, there was no way we were going to get our case in front of a judge to make a decision before the events that were that she basically, long story short, it was a month-long vacation in an area that had a high prominence of COVID-19, and there were a couple of other concerns. And there was no way before that plane took off that we were going to get heard by a judge. And, I explained to her every option we had if something happened while we were there. And then she asked me, but what about before there? And there was nothing we could do because there was just no legal mechanism created for this pandemic or for a pandemic of this proportion that could have gotten us in front of a judge fast enough. And primarily because we could not articulate immediate danger of the children. If we could articulate these children were going to be immediately hurt, maybe. But even on the criminal side of things, I mean, when I was with the Juvenile Delinquency Division, did you all know that there is actually usually a prosecutor appointed to handle sex offenses that children commit against other children? And part of that job means they have to watch forensic interviews of the respondents because they're not called defendants in juvenile court. They're called respondents. And I really hope nobody other than lawyers ever has to witness or watch through the forensic interview of a 13-year-old charged with raping a 7-year-old.
I have two cases I won't handle. And let me be very clear. It's not because I don't believe everybody deserves the best representation they can. It's because I, after much soul searching, have decided that there are at least two areas of law where I do not trust myself to give them zealous representation. One is heroin dealers. I had a cousin who died from a heroin overdose. I've represented heroin dealers, and it was in one case where I caught myself thinking, well, worst case scenario, they're a heroin dealer, they deserve to be in jail, and that's not a healthy thought for a lawyer to have. So I decided I've identified my bias. I'm not going to handle that type of case anymore. The second was a child sexual assault case, and I've seen some shit. And I never want to see it again, and I will not handle those cases anymore. We have one question from the room that I think is a good one to end on because we only have 5 minutes left. Is from Head Foxen. Head has asked, if you need a lawyer, how do you find a good one?
I'm going to say something not to actually answer the question, but just to piss off Boozy. Avo.
Fuck you.
What I would recommend is talk to them. Usually, a lot of attorneys will let you do an initial consultation before they'll charge you anything. In fact, they have to because they have to set up a billing agreement. Talk to them. If they seem like they're a snake oil salesman, they probably are. I've met very few attorneys that present competently but are actually total morons. I mean, every once in a while, you can usually tell. Like, if your danger sense is going off, don't be afraid to walk away and find somebody else. And then, if you know anyone who's got connections to the legal system, just ask them. Usually they'll give you a bunch of names of people.
We are ethically forbidden from giving you just one name, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Friends and family. If you've had any friends and family who've had dealings with the legal system, ask how their attorney was.
Another thing when you're looking through, if you don't have someone, which is very rare, but if you don't have somebody who's ever consulted an attorney, and you're looking through some of the online websites, go to the attorney's firm, see how the firm page looks, see how much money they're willing to put into their presentation for. I'm not saying that everyone's going to go all out, but if you're in an area where they're the ones that look like they have a 1998 splash page and all the other firms in the same area have more modern law firm websites, it's one thing to think about. Also think about what area of law that you really need the help in. Is it something that this firm handles as a practice area, or is it something that's not listed in their general services? Because some firms will take cases that aren't in their average practice area, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their attorneys are as up to speed on it as somebody who is.
Well, and I will with the website. Websites can be very misleading. A couple of the lawyers that I know who are the best damn lawyers in their fields that I've ever met have web pages that look like they're from GeoCities. Tim Dennison in Louisville, Kentucky, one of the best criminal attorneys you'll ever meet. His website looks like something you'd find on Angel Fire in the 90s. My father, actually, my dad's been practicing over 40 years. He has never bought advertising. His business is solely word of mouth. He's one of the better trial attorneys in Kentucky. So those can be kind of misleading. I always say websites tell you they have a good advertising budget.
Yeah. So in Kansas City, in the surrounding areas, there are tons of billboards for a company called Jungle Law. As this guy who he celebrates that he looks like Tarzan, and that's his shtick. And their entire business model is what they're a referral farm. So you call into them seeking out legal advice, and then they give you the name of an attorney, and then they charge the attorney that if you actually go. So be real careful with like billboard attorneys, because a lot of times they're referral farms. And these guys are a joke too. I have heard some horror stories about when they've actually shown up to court, like barely able to speak, sort of horror stories. So billboards are a big red flag for me.
Yeah, I've worked at a billboard firm. Don't pay them. You will not get your money's worth.
I was the TV attorneys around here. The same thing. It's a referral firm, and sometimes you'll get like our firm is actually one of the referral sources for one of those TV attorneys. But before you can even get to us, you have to hire the TV attorney first. So you really don't get much of a choice. We just end up being the one they call.
So we have 1 minute left here, it looks like. So final thoughts?
Don't break the law.
Stop breaking the law, asshole!
Don't talk to cops.
Don't talk to cops.
I am exercising my right to remain silent, and I would like to speak with an attorney.
No, I'm exercising my right to remain silent, and I want to speak to an attorney.
There we go.
As firm and as definite as you can get, because the rule on this is that any leeway, and the cop can just ignore you.
Yeah. If you say, I want my lawyer dog, you get me. You don't want me for litigation.
So, folks, as our moderator just said, if they don't break the law, you guys don't have jobs. I think that's a wonderful thing to go out on. So, folks, I am Boozy. This has been Buddy, Sage, Scuff, Tiago. Thank you all for joining me. If you're watching this stream, please remember to donate to ERPS, the Indie FurCon charity. You'll find the donate link right above us on the screen if you're watching online. Until next year, where we'll see you all there. I'm Boozy. You have a wonderful evening.
Silver Gato Man, he bought me a coffee. Silver Gato Man, here is the song for thee. He likes to video all the panels at the cons. You should go and watch them whether they are short or long. Silver Gato Man, you video that's not a jibe. All of you go to his YouTube channel and like and subscribe.